I woke up earlier than usual. I was midway through some dream about God knows what. The sound of dripping water forced me up. It was the ceiling just next to my bed. That irritated me. I can't afford to fix it. It was just a small puddle, so I dried it up and placed a bucket under so as not to have to deal with it so early in the morning. I remember deciding to go for a walk and get some coffee and something to eat, as I was all out of cereal and pretty much everything else that's edible. So I started off down the street to a small coffee shop, which opened earlier than most. On my way there, I passed the old lady who'd been begging around the area lately. It wasn't anything odd. Living in South Africa, you get used to the poverty. The poorest people here live on next to nothing, and beggars are a common sight. She glared at me as I walked by, trying to ignore the fact that she was there. As I got close to the cafe, the city began to wake up. The air filled with the sound of horns and vendors, beginning to promote their various goods to people that were already on the streets. I saw the old man standing on his corner at the intersection where he begged for change. He'd been there for as long as I can remember, never missing a day, always with a smile on his face. No one really knew his name, no one ever bothered to find out, so he was simply known as the old man. He'd been there for as long as I can remember, never missing a day and always with a smile on his face. No one really knew his name and no one ever bothered to find out, so he was simply known as the old man. After picking up my coffee and a few rolls, I got an email from my boss. Something had come up, so he wasn't opening the office. He was probably sick, but he didn't trust any of us to hold down the fort, so he preferred just not to open at all. On my way back, I passed the old lady who'd been begging earlier, Gogo, which means grandmother in Zulu, as the kids in the area started calling her. She was at the old man's corner, and the two of them were deep in conversation. As I got closer, I tried to hear what they were saying, but they were speaking one of the 10 native languages of South Africa, and I had no clue which one it was. Not that I understand any of them. A few more meters, and they both suddenly stopped, and I realised that Gogo had slightly turned her head as if she was trying to stare at me without being obvious. I realised that Gogo had slightly turned her head as if she was trying to stare at me without being too obvious. Whatever. I wasn't worried. I had the day off, so I planned to go home and relax. I got back to my apartment and finished off the remaining dregs of coffee in my cup and ate half a roll. I decided to watch some TV, so I got myself a blanket and headed towards the couch. As I was about to sit down, I glanced in the mirror, and the reflection of my pitiful apartment stared back at me. At the time, it seemed to almost mock me, immediately bringing back those feelings of resentment from the night before. As I was about to sit down, I glanced at the mirror and the reflection of my pitiful apartment stared back at me. At the time, it seemed to almost mock me, immediately bringing back those feelings and resentment from the night before. I believe myself to be a sane man, or reasonably sane. Now, I believe myself to be a sane man, or reasonably sane.
Now I believe myself to be a sane man.
Or reasonably sane.
I consider myself to be a sane man, but I consider myself to be a reasonably sane man.
I consider myself to be sane as well. Do you? But I swear on my very being that what I saw next really happened. Standing there, rage building within me, I blinked, and when my eyes opened, my apartment, like my room the night before, had been mirrored. I looked at the reflection, noting that everything was opposite where it should have been. When I saw the door to my apartment opening, something was off. Aside from the obvious, my door always creaked when it opened, but I hadn't heard a thing. Without missing a beat, and before I had time to close my eyes and reevaluate what was happening, I whipped my head round, only to find my door soundly shut. I whipped my head around, only to find the door soundly shut. I whipped my head around. I felt relieved for a moment, but then I looked back at the mirror to see the door in the reflection now standing completely open. I was in a state of complete and utter disbelief. I only wish that was the end, but only a few seconds later, a hand appeared. It was thin and bony and looked to be badly burnt, while portions of it were raw and fleshy, as if someone had clawed down them, tearing off chunks of skin. The arm grabbed hold of the door frame, and a second identical hand appeared. This one grabbed at the frame as well and began to pull in such a way as if they were supporting the body to which they were attached. A shadow appeared in the doorway, and I looked back at the real door again, and it was shut. I closed my eyes and turned back, fearing what I might see next. When I opened them, everything was back to normal. I spent the rest of the day at my girlfriend's place. I closed my eyes as I turned back, fearing what I might see next. However, when I opened them, everything was back to normal. I knew at this point that something was wrong.